Welcome to Screams from the Center. In this broadcast, I hope to provide you with information on topics that I find interesting and give my take on them. My name is David, and in this episode, we ask the question, are conservatives at war with the poor? But wasn't that war on poverty term used by liberals to promote social programs of the New Deal and the Great Deal? Yes, that is the war on poverty, but not the war on the poor. Now, as a rule, I detest the term war on. It's awkward, clumsy, it does nothing to help with what we are at war with, nor does it solve a problem. War is a conflict, not a solution. That said, when it is a conflict, I will call it out. Recently, those on the right have expressed a problem with the way our society runs. We are told by the right that we live in a welfare state. Or even more broadly, we'll say it's an entitlement state. And for that reason, everything is bad in the country at this moment. Illegals come in, wipe our coffers clean. Lazy people want to steal and not work. They want to do drugs. The disabled people aren't really disabled. They just go, oh, my back hurts. Give me money. This is the categorization and description that we often see even in the mainstream right-wing press, such as Fox News. So, yes, all these people are taking money from hard-working Americans, real Americans, and that's what's destroying us, right? Well, let's look and see what we can do to stop these moochers and illegals. First, we need to know the level of abuse of the system. I've looked at the numbers, and according to many right-wing sites, we spend around $400 billion per year for illegals. But is that number actually true? Well, okay, no. A more realistic number is roughly about $2 billion a year. Now, while that's a lot of money, and I don't deny that, it is less than we spend on dog treats in the United States per year, which is at $6.2 billion. So, let's look at things into perspective. Okay, so maybe it's not illegals, but it's got to be those damn lazy moochers, right? How much do we spend on welfare? Well, again, the rough estimates are around $21 billion per year. Now, if you include every social program in the United States, including SSI, which is Disability Social Security, EIC, which is Earned Income Tax Credits, food stamps, and everything that is considered welfare, but excluding health care benefits, and Social Security, we spend around $220 billion per year. Now, this is total spending. It's not even close to what conservatives claim is spent on illegals alone. So we're left with the fact that, by the numbers, the claims don't ring true. Now, we know what is being said in terms of the numbers, but what about fraud? Surely most of this money is being misused. That's what we hear. I mean, Sean Hannity on his program on Fox News had a guy who eats lobster on food stamps. So he's a lazy moocher. He doesn't want to work. He says he doesn't want to work. And he's eating lobster. Lobster from your hard-earned dollars. Well, I used to ask around, and all the numbers I used to get from conservatives would say that waste, fraud, and abuse is anywhere from 20 to 80%. So we have to stop this. Now, they also make the claim that even 1% is enough to spurn some sort of reform. Now, we'll be going into into certain terminology in a segment that I'm going to call Words Have Meaning later, and reform is going to be one of my key topics. That will come later, sorry. Again now, this doesn't seem to pan out the way conservatives say. The rates in some of the the rates of fraud are lower than most corporate waste and charity waste. Welfare waste is around 2 to 8%. Or 10 times less than what the right wing tries to tell you is waste. Now, if your argument is that any welfare we give out is waste, well then, okay, fine. That's your argument. That's what point you're going to make. But in terms of people who should not be collecting benefits, who collect benefits illegally or some other manner, it's around 2 to 8%. So while any waste is bad and takes away from the limited resources that we allocate for these types of services, this is not unusual in the slightest. It actually does show that the system works. Part of the problem is that you have to apply for these benefits. You have to go through qualification processes in order to receive these benefits. So the system is set up to try and weed out people. And apparently from the numbers, it does pretty well. Okay, so we've seen what the waste rate is. So let's move on to what conservatives want to do when it comes to being poor. Many of the states are considering mandating drug testing on welfare recipients to ensure the funds are not being used to buy drugs or otherwise abused. Drug testing is meant to identify and stop payments to people who have been tested positive for drug use while on government assistance. They also propose that constant cuts to account for the waste that they perceive. Also, why they do a campaign of public shaming in their various news outlets, Town Hall, Forbes, the Daily Mail, Fox News, and the various right-wing talk show hosts. Poor shaming. So, is there any reason to believe that welfare recipients take drugs at higher rates? Again, no. The facts show that in places that drug testing has been actually used, it is shown not only to cost the state hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, but has shown lower rates of drug abuse than the average population. So again, this clearly does not solve a problem, nor does it eliminate any waste. So why do more and more conservatives call for more drug testing? I will get to that part of the picture soon. But as we've established earlier, conservatives seem obsessed with eliminating waste in social programs. Some even call to eliminate the programs altogether. Budget cuts from conservatives will always be upwards of 75 to 90% cuts to social programs and nothing else. Well, maybe public funding for broadcasting, arts, entertainment, and sciences. But usually any kind of program that aids people will be on the chopping block. Conservatives will come on Fox News, they'll display surfers buying lobsters, like I said earlier, and imply that these programs allow the poor, lazy, well-living, and often better than you. I don't have lobster. Well, okay, I don't like lobster, but I don't have lobster. I don't have fancy steaks all the time. So, these guys must be getting free money, lots of money, and I'm working to pay them. This narrative is one that Reagan painted decades ago with the welfare queen problem. He imagined someone collecting multiple benefits for multiple children that she may or may not have, and basically living high on the hog on the American taxpayer's dime. It sounds really good. Everybody fell for it, including Clinton, when he instituted work for welfare programs. He wanted to make sure that people were putting in time in order to receive these benefits. But is that the way it really is? Does Fox actually paint an accurate picture? The trouble with this narrative is that it's basically poor shaming. It's kind of like fat shaming, slut shaming, all of those things that we detest, but we seem to find okay when we apply it to the poor. It negates and it assumes that poor people choose to be poor because for some reason this is a better life than working and providing for your family. That's the way that they try to present it to you. It negates any harsh circumstances, harsh times, and basically makes people feel that they are worthless. But it's also a lie. Many people work very hard, but lack the education and opportunity to make more. It's a known fact that working for minimum wage puts you below the poverty line and actually qualifies you for food stamps and other types of government aid. You could be working hard, a 40-hour week, and be on these social programs. So is laziness really the factor? It all comes down to measuring a person's worth. If you put in a day's worth of work, should you not be dignified and treated like a person for working hard? It doesn't matter what the work is. If we paid people on a level consistent with working with dignity, a lot of these problems would solve themselves. Now, I know conservatives will make arguments about, we can't afford it, it's going to cost jobs. Quite frankly, the statistics don't pan out. So in short, when we give people on the when we begin to measure a person's worth to society by the size of their paycheck and where they get it, we set up this narrative that the more money people make, the more they seem to know or understand their lives and the lives of people around them. We give people on the narrative that Republicans like to say is that if we give people on the lower economic side of the scale less money in terms of government benefits and tax breaks, that will incentivize them to work harder. Yet on the other scale, the fabulously rich, if we try to tax them even a little bit more than what we do now, which is historic lows, that will disincentivize them to actually work and produce. Which, if you follow the logic, the two are completely opposite. So we have to figure out as a society if incentivizing people makes people more productive or de-incentivizing people makes more productive, and then apply that across the board. I mean, I find it interesting that we do give corporations, banks, rich people orders of magnitude more money in terms of subsidies, tax credits, tax forgiveness, and tax holidays. And we're told that unless we give them this money, they won't have the incentive to produce or contribute to the economy. Why can't we impose the same rules on everybody? And this sounds like a double standard to me. Rich people need incentives to produce. Poor people need disincentives to produce. I know some use the excuse that no poor person created a job, but I disagree with that. If you buy a burger, a head of lettuce, or a 36-room mansion, you are creating jobs, period. You're saving jobs, period. It doesn't matter what you buy or how much you buy. You as a purchaser, you as a consumer, are creating jobs. Now, entrepreneurs enable a product to come to market, but it is consumers who decide if that product is going to be successful. So, really, the best way we can paint this is rich people create temporary jobs and poor people make those jobs permanent. This goes back to arguing against supply-side economics, or Reaganomics. I prefer the term that President George H.W. Bush called it when he was opposing Reagan in the nomination in 1980, voodoo economics. The idea is if you give to the top, they will create jobs which lead to more demand and all benefit from it. The biggest issue with this whole thing is it hasn't worked in 30 years. It hasn't worked anywhere we tried it. Iraq, Afghanistan, Chile. Greece, none of these places. You can't create a supply with no demand and expect magic. You can create a limited supply and a temporary employment situation, and if the consumers like your product or service, they will create the demand, which will make those things permanent. So it is poor people. It is anybody who spends $1 on a product. They are the ones that create jobs. Demand drives the economy. It also spurs innovation. If you buy more iPhones than you buy Android phones, Apple gets bigger and Apple does more. If the reverse happens, then Android does. It's plain and simple. You're taught this from the beginning. In fact, kids learn this stuff rather organically on their own. So I go back to my argument. Every job that every person has, you are actually hired by middle class and poor people. They are the top consumers. They spend most of their income as a percentage than rich people do. You can only go out to eat at a restaurant so many times a year. You can only buy so many houses. You can only buy so many cars. But everybody consumes roughly the same amount of food. We all use about the same amount of shampoo. There are lots of products that people consume every day that impact them on the lower scale than the upper scale. There's a limit to what a lot of money can do. So we have a clear case that conservatives measure the value of a person by the size of their wallet, as I mentioned. These tactics are plain and simple. They're shaming. Hell, some conservatives don't deny that they're shaming. We see complaints that a poor person has an air conditioner or a TV or an Xbox or something like that, you know. I got into an argument one time. Someone told me that they saw someone on food stamps using a cell phone and then getting into an SUV, a brand new SUV. My question is, what did you do about it? Did you run to the internet and complain? Did you call up the food stamp office? Did you ask that person to identify themselves so that you could report them and that a proper investigation happened? Chances are the answer is no. Conservatives aren't turning people in. They're complaining and saying we need to cut a program rather than being a diligent citizen. If you see waste, fraud, and abuse, report it. Don't just say, oh, that damn welfare system is horrible, we need to get rid of it. No, it's people like you not doing anything that allow abuse. The system doesn't allow abuse. There are rules against that. People break the rules. But if nobody turns them in, if nobody reports them as breaking the rules, you're not going to get any kind of improvement in the system. You're going to get a lot of excuses to explain. But I kind of go back to the idea of a poor person having an air conditioner or a refrigerator or something. Now, okay, this is 2015. And one would hope that even our poor would have a higher standard of living than we did in 1890. Okay? And my favorite question to ask conservatives when I hear this talk about how a poor person has a cell phone is, what should a poor person in America look like? How poor do they need to look before you give them any sympathy? That's my question. Never mind. Never mind there could be an explanation for why they have a cell phone. Maybe they lost their job 2 months ago and they had a cell phone already. Or they had bought that new car and then 6 months later they were fired. There could be reasons. Or they could be cheating. The problem is you people don't ask. You people don't know. You people don't even try to know. You just go on the internet, you just listen to your Fox News and complain. What does it take for conservatives to give a measure of sympathy? Now, I argue that no measure except for people making $1 million or more. So why does anyone else care how the poor look? I know I don't. So I do sit here and wonder why, again, the double standard. Why? That's it for this episode. I'm hoping you got a bit of information and enjoyed this. Please subscribe to me, and I'll get out more videos as fast as I can. Thank you for joining in, and have a great week.